Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome to another WWE wrestling belt related video, or more to the point, the beginning of a wrestling belt related video series. As I'm going to go over the evolution of the WWF/WWE Championship from 1986 or late 85 all the way up to current day, as just through my replica belt collecting, I found myself having, with the exception of one proxy, which is the exact same design, just with different wording on the belt, as well as a different color strap. But I have every version of the championship in some form or fashion, including two versions or two belts that never actually officially represented the championship, even though that they were made to do so, one of which didn't even manage to appear on television. So we're going to go through and do this video, or this series, in some parts here. Today we're going to be looking at the championship's design from 1986, or October of 1985, until March of 1998. With three different title designs, with some variants to discuss, although I can't really show them because I don't own like all the different designs or variants of those particular belts, but we'll at least talk about them. This isn't going to be like a comprehensive guide as far as like every title holder or things along those lines. I'll try to touch on as many as I can personally remember. But we will go over some of like the notable storylines or some of the notable matches involving these particular championships. So to begin our series, we are going to start in October of 1985 with the Reggie Parks designed WWF 95 or 90, or sorry, not 90, 86 or late 85 championship. This version of the title was only held by one person. And that person was Hulk Hogan, somebody who I've never liked as a wrestler, even back when I first started getting into wrestling. When I thought that The Undertaker was legitimately, supernatural in nature, I still, thought that Hogan stuff just looked really bad and kind of lame. But yeah, so never a Hogan fan. Unfortunately, a friend of mine actually bought this same replica belt, and he was a huge Hogan fan, but, has sort of distanced himself from him since then. But we're not here to talk about the person so much as we're here to talk about the championship. So the WWF title had several other design variations from the late 60s, when the Worldwide Wrestling Federation initially split off from the NWA. All the way up until this belt came out, and a lot of them were like trophy medal belts, or were just not really designs that I was particularly interested in. However, I'm a huge fan of Reggie Parks and Reggie Parks championship designs. I believe Reggie also made the 84 and 85 championships. However, they were based off of like NWA designs, so like the national championship or the NWA television championship. This belt here, though, that debuted in October of 85, is, in my opinion, the first like genuinely great, unique WWF title belt, world championship design. It's kind of an underrated design, and it's kind of a forgotten design, considering the fact that it was only ever held by one person. And if you weren't a fan of that person, then you weren't really introduced to this particular championship design. I was, however, even though I wasn't a Hogan fan, because in 1995 I went to called the Tour de Force. It was my second ever live WWF show. The previous year I went to what was called the Heart Attack Tour. And when I was there, I purchased a Intercontinental Championship. I guess you could say it was my first wrestling belt, even though it's definitely not the same standards or quality of these replicas. But even in 1995, I was a bit perplexed when I ended up buying this version of the WWF Championship. This was the foam replica belt, or the foam championship belt, that you could get at live events, or you could order it through WWF Magazine. And I always thought this was really weird, because this was not the WWF Championship that was around when I was getting into wrestling. We're going to see that version a little bit later on. But I think what it comes down to is that the WWF didn't own the actual rights to the design that was active when I bought this belt in 1995, but they owned this version of the Hogan belt design. And you can see, again, it's got the WWF lettering, it's got the banners and everything. So this was kind of interesting for me as a kid, but it was based off of this design. So I think the WWF owned the rights to this version of the championship, but not one that would come a bit later on. So that's probably why the foam belts were based off of this version, because they didn't have to pay a licensing fee to be able to make merchandise of the other design here. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. When it comes to this championship design, again, it was only ever held by one person. That was Hulk Hogan. This was the championship that he wore to WrestleMania 2 with the steel cage match with King Kong Bundy. And, you know, this is a really great, like, world championship design. It's dual plated, meaning that the recessed areas have a nickel plating, while the raised areas, or the detailing of the belt, was done in gold plating. Now, the replica is obviously not, you know, like actual gold, but it still looks really, really cool. You've got these heavyweight banner, the world heavyweight wrestling champion. The world is not done in a banner and is unpainted, which is actually similar to one of the versions of the WCW championship, where the world portion of the plate also wasn't painted in. So I guess it's just something that Reggie just kind of did, I guess, is something noteworthy, I guess, for some of his title designs. We do have the oval globe with the axis, with the longitude and latitude lines kind of messed up there, but it's, you know, an interesting take on the championship. We do have, like, Africa, Europe, and Asia on the left side of the globe, whereas you had North and South America on the right side of the globe. But on the foam belt, they actually have North America and South America on the left side, and the Africa, Europe, and Asia on the right side of the globe. I guess this is meant to be Australia, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Still kind of interesting, though. And yeah, there's just very odd shapes to the continents there. Reggie used to use a lot of clip art for his belts. That's why several of his titles have design features in common with one another. And I guess for whatever reason, this was the globe that they went with there. This globe also appears, I believe, on the tag team, the WWF Tag Team Championships. Sort of like that classic tag from the, like the Bulldog tag up through into the end of the Attitude Era and the beginning of the Ruthless Aggression Era, had this sort of version of the globe on there as well. And then the belt also had world flags on the side plates there. So Canada and Japan, United States and Mexico. And then on the other side plates, we have the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, along with the Australian flag. And then we've got the Soviet Union flag along with the Italian flag, because again, this was the 1980s. So the Cold War was still a thing. The Soviet Union was still a thing at that point in time. So yeah, like I said, this was only ever held by Hulk Hogan. There were two versions of this championship. So the first version had this sort of floral tooling going around the periphery of the strap. And then the second version had the clamshell tooling that we'll see a little bit later on here going around it. And it also had the gold tip. The first version of the belt, I don't believe, had a tip on it. So that was sort of a bit of a difference between the 86 and the 87 versions of the Hogan Championship there. But again, a really sort of underrated design, but it was one that was only meant to last until 1987, because during the build-up to WrestleMania 3, Bobby the Brain Heenan, in kayfabe at least, introduced a new version of the championship for when Andre the Giant defeated Hulk Hogan. He needed a belt that felt suitable for a champion of Andre's size. And that led to the creation of the Andre belt. So this is the Andre 87. This is the Fandu version of the Andre belt. This is also an all gold version. However, the actual Andre belt was dual plated like the Hogan 86 was before it. And this belt is, missing the WWF logo at the top and as well as at the top of the side plates there. But this is the basic design for the Andre belt here. And this was sort of an interesting design because this was considered, or is considered, a heritage design, meaning that it incorporated different elements from other championship belts that were in the company at the time. Later in the series, we're going to see another heritage design that was inspired by different versions of the respective world championships that were used to make its design. But this one is a combination of all of the championships that were currently active in the WWF at the time. So we have the elements of the Hogan belt, being the side plates here in particular. So we do have the same grouping of side plates, the same grouping of country flags together, and in that same orientation. You also have this laurel wreath at the bottom here, which was reminiscent of the laurel wreath on the Hogan belt. You also had the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, which was the same banner as the Hogan belt as well. However, this also incorporated elements of two different versions of the tag team championships, so including the WrestleMania 1 tag title belts that had the two eagles on either side of the globe, along with this sort of rectangular border or shape that kind of goes around the Eagles as well. You also have the Intercontinental Championship globe there, as well as the bottom portion of the Intercontinental Championship with the step design and the compass stars on either side. Again, you've got the laurel wreath with the star at the bottom, similar to the Hogan belt, with some scroll work there that was also very reminiscent of the Hogan design. And this heavyweight wrestling champion banner, along with the scroll work in between the two banners, is reminiscent of the classic Reggie WWF Tag Team Championship, which had Tag Team Wrestling Champion, or champions, I think, on the banners there. But it had the curved banner with the tag team on it, and then it had the sort of like the scroll banner here with the wrestling champion. So it was a very interesting combination of all the different designs that were out there at the time. You do have, again, the world banner here and the heavyweight wrestling champion banners from the Hogan belt. The two eagle design was a really cool look to it as well. And this was meant to be, or at least according to what was indicated by Gorilla Monsoon's commentary, when Hogan was coming to the ring for WrestleMania 3 with this championship belt, it was indicated that the Hogan 86 design was going to be retired, and regardless of who won that night, the Andre belt was going to be the one that they were going to use going forward. And this did make sense because Hogan held several different designs. He had technically five versions of the championship that only he ever held. He had the 84 and 85, as well as the 86, which had two different versions of it, although the basic design was the same on both. And then you had the mystery belt, which was only used for a couple of house shows, and I'm not going to include in this chronology because I don't want a championship belt that has Hogan's photograph on it. So anyway, but this was actually meant to be the championship going forward, and was designed, like I said, to look good on Andre the Giant. But this was just a really cool and underrated world title design in general. Even in the modern WWE 2K wrestling games, the last two, like 24 and 25, have both used this version of the championship, including last year, which had the WrestleMania Showcase, which actually had Hogan using this belt in his match with Andre the Giant in the Showcase, even though he never actually wore or used this version of the championship. And at the end of the night, he celebrated with the Hogan belt once again. But yeah, really, really cool design. I wish this had been used as the World Championship, because around this time, the world titles were pretty small. And this would have actually beaten, I'm pretty sure, it would have came out before the big gold belt that NWA and WCW were using. I think that debuted... Oh no, that may have debuted already at this point in time. But it would have competed with that, with this like really nice, large world title design. However, unfortunately, that was not meant to be. So after the match with Andre the Giant, after the couple of promo segments and the television spots showing this version of the championship with Hulk Hogan there, or in the build up to the Hogan Andre match, this title would disappear. A version of it was also meant to be used in the No Holds Barred movie. However, they also scrapped that, and it was just used as a background prop, I believe, in a single scene. But I've never actually watched No Holds Barred, and I really have no intention on watching No Holds Barred, so I can't really verify that the dual-plated Andre belt on a white strap was like in the background of a scene. If you've seen the movie and if you could verify that, let me know. But it's a shame that this version of the championship was never actually used, and instead, when WrestleMania 3 was over, Hogan simply went back to using this version of the championship. He would use this design up until February of 1988, when on an episode of the main event, not Saturday night's main event, but this was, I think this was on a Friday night, if I recall correctly. But this was the WrestleMania 3 rematch that saw Hulk Hogan defend his championship against Andre the Giant. In a backstage promo, which was obviously pre-recorded, you had Hogan wearing this version of the championship, talking about his upcoming match later that night with Andre the Giant. However, when Hogan came out to the ring, he was wearing a very different version of the championship when he brought out to the ring the dual-plated version of the Winged Eagle title. So this is probably one of the most legendary designs for a world championship out there. This is, again, just a classic Reggie Parks design. And this was a title belt that I wasn't a huge fan of until I got into replica belt collecting. And now I got to say, I absolutely love and adore this version of the championship. Now, this is similar to the version of the belt that Hogan wore out to the ring, but there are a couple of differences. Number one, the sidebars here were a little bit shorter. They were kind of more like this on the belt, so they didn't go much beyond the three support bars that kind of held them in place. And the belt had a gold tip, which we do see here. So this one does have a gold tip. However, on the gold tip, there were two like 3D diamonds there. And the champion, where the logo plate is here, actually wasn't just WWF champion. Instead, it had the WWF logo, and I believe it had Hulk Hogan's name underneath. It also wasn't painted in. It was just dual-plated like the rest of the title was. But this is an absolutely fantastic design. We do have the relief plate for the world, and underneath of it, we do have a heavyweight word lettering here, which, similar to the world wording on the Hogan belt that preceded this, was unpainted initially. However, later versions of the dual-plated WWF Championship would feature a painted-in version of the heavyweight banner. I contemplated painting in the heavyweight banner at one point, but I decided, because of a later purchase, that I was going to keep it as it was. But yeah, this was the belt that Hogan infamously dropped to Andre the Giant with some chicanery involving a crooked referee being bought by Ted DiBiase and given plastic surgery to resemble referee Dave Hebner, and would perform a count on Hogan, even though Hogan's shoulder was well off the map, because you certainly couldn't have somebody like Andre the Giant beat Hulk Hogan clean. Perish the thought of that, right? But Andre would be the second person to hold this version of the championship, which he only held for a few minutes, as he famously gifted the title, although I believe he called it the Tag Team Championship, if not in that promo and one leading up to the match. But he ended up gifting this title to Ted DiBiase, giving it to him as DiBiase had paid for Andre's services and paid to become the WWF champion. And you know what? I don't care what anyone says. There's video evidence of DiBiase being presented as the WWF champion. He may have been stripped of the title, but I think his reign should be recognized, because he did defend the title in a couple of house show matches, or at least he was billed as the WWF champion with photographic evidence from those shows. But let's take a look at the design here of this championship. So we'll start again with the side plates here. We do have the sunburst styling there, with some grapplers performing a leg sweep on the outside and locking up on the inside. The other side plates are the exact same design, so we're not going to necessarily look at them. We already also looked at the logo plate, but then we've got the center plate here with the eagle here, with the feathers really catching the light and almost glowing on this belt when the light hits it the right way. The eagle's wings do come off of the plate itself and actually help shape the design of this championship here. We got the small globe sort of behind the eagle, and the eagle is clutching the wrestling champion banner there as well. We do have some small globes on either side, and it's hard to see in the replica, but this is actually originally meant to be a maple leaf, because Reggie Parks, the creator of this version of the WWF Championship, was Canadian. So we actually hid some maple leaves in the scroll pattern here. They're kind of visible, but kind of not in the replica, but that's fine. You do have the wrestlers also locking up on either side of the eagle's wings here, and you've got the WWF, or in this case the WWE logo here in sort of like the sunburst pattern as well. The belt also does come with a gold tip. Like I said, the original version of this title had the 3D diamonds for the gold tip, and the logo plate had no paint on it, and I'm pretty sure it had Hogan's name on it. However, the selling of the championship to Ted DiBiase was considered to be sort of a violation of the championship, and so WWF President Jack Tunney stripped Ted DiBiase of the title, and that led to the WrestleMania 4 tournament for the championship, which saw the Macho Man Randy Savage win the title, with Hogan having to be like front and center for that event as well, because again, you certainly couldn't have somebody like Macho Man just win the title on his own and have his moment without Hogan having to be, like the driving force behind it. As you can tell, I'm not a Hogan fan. The Macho Man would hold this version of the championship for a year, from WrestleMania 4 to WrestleMania 5. However, he debuted his own variation of the championship during his reign, which had some minor changes to it. Number one, the sidebars, I believe, during his reign went to the size that they are now. I think the 3D diamonds on the gold tip also disappeared. But the biggest thing was that the snaps on the strap were replaced by Velcro. So for everybody who's not a fan of Velcro being on the modern wrestling championships, that was done all the way back in 1988, when Macho Man had a Velcro fastening for his Winged Eagle Championship. So the legendary Winged Eagle was the first version of the WWF Championship to be secured by Velcro. Well, so let that sink in. Macho Man would drop the title back to Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 5. Now, Macho Man would come out with his kind of beat up Velcroed version of the Winged Eagle belt. However, when he dropped the belt to Hogan, Hogan celebrated with the original WrestleMania 4 version of the championship. So it had the 3D diamonds, it had the shorter sidebars, and it also had the unpainted heavyweight banner on it. This version of the championship would famously be destroyed by Mr. Perfect in a backstage angle where he smashed the belt with a hammer. Now, in 1998, the WWF would debut the Hardcore Championship, which was a Winged Eagle title belt that had been smashed up and sort of reconnected together with duct tape. And for a while, the rumor was, or the legend was, that the Hardcore Championship was the same version of the title that was smashed by Mr. Perfect. However, that's not the case. The version that Mr. Perfect smashed was dual-plated, and the version that the Hardcore title was made of was all gold. I actually believe that the Hardcore Championship might have been a smashed up version of the Winged Eagle Championship that was used in the box on the pedestal the night after Stone Cold lost the title after the Breakdown in Your House pay-per-view. It may have been that belt, or it may have just been one that was specifically made to be the Hardcore title. Not entirely sure. But the smashed version of the championship was the dual-plated, like, WrestleMania 4 belt, and was not later used to make the Hardcore Championship. Hogan would debut his version of the dual-plated Winged Eagle title shortly after it was smashed up by Mr. Perfect there, and it was similar to this design here. So it had the clamshell tooling. It just had the basic texture tooling in the snap boxes. The original version had like a flower going around each of the snaps, so that was no longer part of the title. His version also would have the heavyweight banner painted in. It would have the full-size sidebars, and would not have the 3D diamonds on the belt tip, and once again still had the Hulk Hogan name on the logo plate there. So he would hold this version until WrestleMania 6, where he would defend the championship in the Ultimate Challenge, when he defended the title against Intercontinental Champion Ultimate Warrior. So at WrestleMania 6, both of these championships were put on the line, winner take all, and at the end of the night, the Ultimate Warrior would leave WrestleMania 6 as the WWF champion. Now, he was the last person to hold the dual-plated championship, as during his reign, the version of the championship that I think most of us associate with the Winged Eagle would debut, and that was the all-gold Winged Eagle Championship. So the Ultimate Warrior would have several different versions of this championship during his reign. He did have this black-strapped version of the championship, which I believe the logo plate here, where it says WWE Champion or WWF Champion, I think his all-gold version might have had Hulk Hogan's name on it, or it might have just read Champion for the first time. He would have versions later on that would actually have Ultimate Warrior underneath the WWF logo there. And very famously, similar to his yellow Intercontinental Championship, he did have several different colored straps for his all-gold Winged Eagle belt, one for each of the pay-per-views that he was as champion. So he had a baby, like a powder or baby blue strap for the WWF Championship. He also had the white strap, which I think was at Survivor Series. The blue one, I believe, was what he defended against Rick Rude at SummerSlam that year. And he had the lavender strap, which I am still highly considering adding to my collection. I'm not going to lie, I'm really tempted to add that belt. But he had the lavender version, which he ended up ultimately dropping to Sergeant Slaughter at the 1991 Royal Rumble. There is also rumors of a yellow-strapped version of the Winged Eagle belt that was made but never used. I believe originally the plan was for Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan to face each other again at WrestleMania 7. This was like early plans for Ultimate Warrior's title run. And the yellow strapped version of the Winged Eagle would have made sense, as it would have been a callback to the Intercontinental title that Ultimate Warrior brought to the ring at the previous WrestleMania. So for 2 WrestleManias in a row, I think the idea was that he would have come to the ring with his championship having a yellow strap. However, Warrior's title reign wasn't overly well received, and the idea was to actually have Hogan win the title back from an Iraqi sympathizer who was initially going to be the Shockmaster himself, Fred Hotman, Typhoon, who at that point was known as Tugboat, and when he became an Iraqi sympathizer, the red and white striped, like pinstriped, weird like white wrestling pants Tugboat would have been renamed to Chic Tugboat. However, instead they had Sergeant Slaughter become the Iraqi sympathizer, and Sergeant Slaughter came into WrestleMania 7 with the black-strapped, all-gold version of the Winged Eagle. Now, this version of the championship in this style of leather cut was the version of the Winged Eagle championship that Hulk Hogan dropped to The Undertaker at the Survivor Series in 1991 with the famous "You Got Me, Brother" moment, and if you know, you know. And was the same version of the championship that would ultimately be vacated after more controversy, with Hogan winning the title back just a few days later, which was BS, but anyway. But it did lead to the 1992 Royal Rumble, with Ric Flair winning the championship. He would drop the title back to Macho Man Randy Savage before taking the title off of him again, only to drop it to my favorite version, or my favorite holder of the Winged Eagle belt, when he dropped it to Bret the Hitman Hart. The all-gold Winged Eagle would also be involved in the controversial finish to WrestleMania 9. You know my feelings of Hogan. You know that, like, him leaving WrestleMania as champion, even though he wasn't involved in the world title match. Anyway. However, Yokozuna would win the title back from Hogan at the King of the Ring, and would go on to hold the title all the way to WrestleMania 10, dropping it back to Bret Hart, who would later in 94 drop the title to Bob Backlund, who was a transitional champion, a former, like the second longest reigning WWF champion of all time. Bob Backlund was a transitional champion to get the belt from Bret Hart onto Diesel, who held the title for a year before dropping it once again back to Bret the Hitman Hart, leading to what, in my opinion, is the greatest Iron Man match of all time, the WrestleMania 6 Iron Man match, because it was a much more logical version of an Iron Man match, where you had 2 people who knew they were going to be in the ring for an hour. You had 2 people that were more cautious at the beginning, not wanting to make a mistake or expend too much energy. And then you had a really exciting, like, final half of that Iron Man match. But there was always something happening in the WrestleMania 12 Iron Man versus later ones, which were a lot more action-packed, but also had a lot more moments where just, like, everybody was down, and a lot more just, like, laying on the mat and resting, versus the WrestleMania 12 one, where there was always something happening. There wasn't, like, a lot of situations where you had both men just laying down. The early part of the S did have more rest holds, but again, you have to think about wrestling from a logical and, like, storytelling standpoint, and I thought the idea of both men kind of being careful in the beginning part of the match and ramping up their desperation to get that first decision was just, in my opinion, it was just brilliant storytelling. And when I look at, like, the Rock and Triple H Iron Man match from 1999, Rock got a pinfall on the champion in like 10 minutes, which would never happen in a normal pay-per-view situation. So I'm not a huge fan of, like, later Iron Man matches, because I think they had too many falls. They had too many, like, situations where the babyface would go up in the beginning and then would fall behind later on and would have to fight back in the last few minutes. But you would have decisions, you would have pinfalls happening at timestamps where, like, in an actual just one fall to a finish match would never have happened that early. So I'm not a huge fan of, like, later Iron Man matches, but the WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match, in my opinion, was perfection. I know it's polarizing. I know not everybody's going to like that opinion. That's just my own. But, you know, if you like the later ones, that's fine. I'm not saying that they were bad matches, but I just thought that the psychology of the WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match was just absolute perfection. Anyway, Shawn Michaels would beat Bret Hart for the championship at WrestleMania 12, and he would go to exchange the titles with Psycho Sid, where the original plan was for him to drop the title to Vader as fallout for their SummerSlam match, where Vader, like, the match kept getting restarted. Shawn would lose by disqualification, or he would lose by countout, and the match would keep getting restarted until it was ultimately thrown out. The idea was that at the Survivor Series, Vader was going to beat Michaels for the championship before dropping it back to him at the Royal Rumble in 1997, which would lead to a Bret Hart Shawn Michaels rematch at WrestleMania 13. Of course, none of those things happened. Sid won the title from Shawn Michaels. He dropped it back to Shawn Michaels before Michaels infamously lost his smile, leading to him vacating the championship, which had Bret Hart winning the title at the Final Four pay-per-view, the Final Four in Your House in February of 97, before dropping it back to Sid the very next night, with The Undertaker winning the championship at WrestleMania 13 in a match that was not great, but I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people, like, claim. I've heard people say it was the worst WrestleMania main event of all time, and that's BS. Like, there's just absolutely no way around that. There were Hogan matches that were far, like the Hogan-Bundy main event, or the fact that the very first WrestleMania involved a tag team match and not a championship match. Like, there are worse main events than the, Psycho Sid and Undertaker match. It wasn't a great match, but it wasn't that bad, and it did lead to the amazing image of The Undertaker in his Shakespeare pose with the purple light on him in his old original debut black and gray, although I would have preferred if he was in black and purple. But just him holding up the championship, it was an incredible moment. The Undertaker would have a feud with Mankind for the title, which involved fire being utilized, which was right out of the gate after the WrestleMania 13 victory, which was the setup for the storyline with Kane. So the build to WrestleMania 14 with The Undertaker and Kane was a year-long story that started the night after WrestleMania 13, with Paul Bearer wanting The Undertaker to take him back. The following week saw the Undertaker's getting his face burned by Mankind with the ball of fire. Mankind also was responsible for Shawn Michaels' best title defense during his 96 reign as well at the In Your House Mind Games. It would be remiss of me, or I would want to miss out on that. That was an incredible match. So you had the fire storyline, because at the Revenge of the Taker, which was the next pay-per-view after WrestleMania, Paul Bearer would get his face burned in a spot that was botched a couple of times because they couldn't get the frickin' lighter to work. But in the end, Paul Bearer had his face burned in a much more brutal-looking fashion than what they originally had planned, with Paul being thrown into Mankind and the fireball hitting him instead of The Undertaker. The way it was pulled off with The Undertaker just very callously, no pun intended, lighting the flash paper right in Paul's face was far more, like, brutal looking than the spot that they had planned, so that worked out really, really well. The Undertaker would drop the title to Bret Hart in SummerSlam of that year, the Heart and Soul SummerSlam, which had an incredible world title match between him and Bret Hart, with the ending of which saw Shawn Michaels inadvertently hitting Undertaker with the chair. If you haven't seen the finish to that match, you really should. The timing and everything, it was just brilliantly pulled off. And this also led directly to the Montreal Screwjob and Shawn Michaels once again becoming champion. At the Royal Rumble in 1998, Stone Cold Steve Austin would go on to win that year, and he would challenge Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14. Shawn Michaels would come in with the all-gold WWF Championship, missing one of the sidebars because it had been snapped off by Austin in a segment where he was swinging the belt around, trying to hit like Degeneration X. And at the end of the night, Stone Cold Steve Austin would win the WWF Championship and would celebrate with the Winged Eagle. So that's going to bring us to the end of this particular portion of the video series. I know I said I wasn't going to go over all of the champions, although I'm pretty sure that I did cover everyone who held the Winged Eagle Championship. I'll probably end up doing something similar with the Big Eagle, though maybe not as fully in depth. But I mean, this was at the earliest stages of my fandom. I came into wrestling in 1993, and like the 93 through 98 champions and the title changes and all of that are just burned into my memory. So I didn't research any of this, like going through and trying to remember who held the championships. I mean, there were other storylines involving the Winged Eagle, like the Lex Express with during Yokozuna's reign, that I probably could have gone a little bit more into there. They also had the 94 Royal Rumble with both Lex and Brett winning the being co-winners and going on to both having title matches at WrestleMania. I think Luger was actually originally going to win both the 93 match and the 94 match. I think he was originally going to win both of those and then drop the title to Brett at the end of WrestleMania 10, because Brett was very clearly the bigger fan favorite, which was done as a live poll at the end of the 94 Royal Rumble. So there are some other storylines that I could have gone into. You did have The Undertaker also defending the championship against Stone Cold Steve Austin, against Vader, against Farouk, and I think what was Farouk's only WWF championship match. You had other things with Shawn Michaels defending against Diesel and some other like storylines with the British Bulldog and stuff as well. But I just wanted to cover mostly like the designs of the championship and kind of some of the major storylines that were going on around these title designs. So when we come back for part 2 of this series, we are going to say farewell to the Winged Eagle Championship and see the debut of its successor, a championship design which was not with us for nearly as long as it should have been. We're going to get into that in the next one. So let me know in the comments below, between 86 and 98, who were your favorite WWF champions? Who were your favorite, what were your favorite title designs? The gold Winged Eagle also had several different like variations in its strap as well. It did have like the round cut that Bret Hart would use throughout most of his reigns. It also had the chipped eagle, variant to it as well. So there were some other like leather cuts and stuff there. But what was your favorite version of the title? What was your favorite, who was your favorite holder of the championships throughout this age range? Let me know. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you in the next one. Until then, take care.